I might be accused of recording you unfairly. Okay, so good morning. We're doing module one, and if you notice, right, we begin the subject with a discussion of close reading. And interestingly enough, when I was reading your discussion boards, and a lot of you guys have heard of the term, right, close reading, but have never really heard of the term discussed in the way that was presented to you, uh, in that module. And really, that's the thing. I think that's why we actually included this module in the course. It was originally not in the course. We didn't really think we'd need to do a close reading module. But from the earlier times we ran the course, this is a relatively new course, we realized that students weren't, at least didn't understand close reading the way we did. And that goes down kasi to how it was presented to you guys in senior high school, and we don't really know how that was done. So we decided to include this. And like I said there, no, close reading is something that actually will probably be the most important skill you'll have to use throughout your college life. And that's because and that's because you're constantly going to be reading, whether online or face to face. You're going to be reading stuff. Your teachers are going to be giving you stuff to take care of, and there is this expectation that you know how to read closely, right? And that's something kasi that college teachers kind of um, assume their students have, that you guys are able to read closely. And so there are times when teachers get frustrated that the students are like, why don't you see they're like, I didn't get the reading, or I didn't notice that in the reading, and that frustrates a lot of teachers. The other thing is, for example, you guys are going to be taking up philosophy in maybe a couple of years. Philo will be highly dependent on close reading. And it's not really just because you're paying attention to the text, but you have to process the text, right? By the time you get to your finals, the teacher is not going to expect you to regurgitate what's on the text. The teacher is going to expect you to talk about how you understand what you were given to read. That's different, right? So that's another part of close reading. Hence the idea of like what I said, no, a thoughtful critical analysis, right? And that's something that we really have to do when we read closely. And the reason why we start this is because this is a reading course, like I said. So we will be reading a lot of stuff that will require you guys to pay close attention to the details. And I'm talking about particularly when you're reading works of fiction or poetry. I think one thing that you guys should know, and I guess you do, but it may not be clearly expressed, is that whenever you're encountering a written work, it is intentional, meaning that everything that the writer put on that work is intentional. There are no accidental things in a work. So if you're reading a poem and you're getting the impression that the poet is talking about, let's say, as an issue like homosexuality, that's not accidental, that's intentional, right? So therefore, one of the things that we're supposed to do as readers is find out what was the intention of the writer. It's bad writing when the writer puts things there that don't make sense or don't have a point. And actually, if you're taking up purposive communication, that's the point of purposive communication, right? Have a point whenever you communicate. And that includes expressive writing. That includes things like creative writing. So that's where we're coming from. So if you notice, no, I talked about things like annotation, things like reading in 3 passes, right? That's what I do. And partially because there you will reach a point where the text becomes so difficult to read that you don't have a choice but to read it more than once, right? And that's true for me too. I mean, I encounter texts, I still have writers that I hate to this day, right? Because if I read them, chances are I'm not going to understand them the first time I read them. It will take me several tries. I remember When I first encountered a critic named Jacques Derrida, took me like 7 passes, right, to read. And the first 4, I got nothing. I couldn't follow. And then by the 4th time, I started to go, hey, I'm starting to get it. So sometimes it takes that long. So you have to be patient with yourself when you read. Also, the other thing I'd like to suggest is while the internet is a wonderful resource and you can get some summaries and stuff to help you guide you with some difficult readings, try to make sure that you don't rely solely on those because those are interpretations and interpretations can lack things that you may pick up. Okay, so there. So what else do I have to talk about? Well, as you know, we had faculty day last Friday. And if you don't know what faculty day is when you guys don't have classes and we all attend meetings. So it's not like we're relaxing or anything. Actually, that was one of the most tiring days of the SEM because you're the whole day in front of Zoom, basically, right? Attending meeting after meeting. And one of the things that I picked up from faculty day, however, is that the school is already studying the return to face-to-face classes. So we are already looking at how the facilities are going to work, how many people are going to be in classrooms, what classrooms are going to be used, things like that. Now, we don't know when it'll happen, right? But the school is already studying it. The other thing that I think, and this is my personal guess, is that if we do return to face-to-face classes, you're still going to be using Canvas, right? So chances are you'll be using Canvas for like a few days of the week and then face-to-face classes, baka once a week pa rin, but face-to-face instead of online. So why is that? Because your materials are already here. Yeah, hybrid, right? Your materials are already here, right? I think by this point, every subject, every course has uploaded their stuff on Canvas. So parang it's a waste naman na we have this set up and then we throw it all away because we're doing face-to-face. So I suspect that it will be a hybrid or a blended learning experience. It'll still be better than this, right? That means that you guys can still go to school, you guys can meet up, you can under the campus. The thing there is you might be spending less time inside classrooms, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Um, so there, the other thing there is if we're only meeting, let's say if classes are only meeting once a week, then there is the possibility of a looser campus, meaning less people in it at any given time because people won't be in. If they don't have anything to do, right? They won't be in class, they won't be in school. So that's not a bad thing, right? Some of you may, some of you from Ateneo High School may have seen the campus, the college campus at full capacity, and it's quite tight. It gets a little crowded. So it's nice to have it not crowded. But anyway, so I am going, wait, no, so some other things about before I shut up and have you guys talk. Um, some other things about close reading that I wanted to point out is that there are ways of doing it. So some people will use a marker or a highlighter, although, well, it's virtual. So if you're using things like Adobe Acrobat, for example, it does have a highlighter function. So you can still highlight text and you can still put marginal notes if you want. Uh, for others, for some really old school people, they will print it out and highlight it on paper and write down marginal notes. I do suggest you do that. If you don't want to do that, but you want to keep it on screen and still take notes and have a notebook or something handy to take down your notes on a particular source, I might talk about note taking in another section, how we can take notes, although that should be covered by your PC for purpose of communication, right? So, in any case, I gave you guys a quick reading, the flash fiction entitled "What Is to Come." right? What did you think about that story? You can chat if you don't want to answer uh, vocally. You can chat. What was your opinion of the story? I'm not asking about the answers to the Padlet. I'm asking your opinion of the story. How did you find it? Well, yeah, it ended as fast as it started. It was a very short. It's flash fiction. That's the point, right? Have you guys encountered flash fiction before? Oh, somebody's coming. Yes. Have you written flash fiction? Okay. Maybe we'll do that as an exercise. Pero in Filipino, yeah. Um, Flash fiction is one of these. I hesitate to call it new, but one of these forms of fiction that's come out recently, where you're writing maybe 100 words, and that's the whole story. It's an interesting writing exercise because it teaches the writer to compress the ideas into as small a format as possible. The shortest one actually is called the 6-word story. Have you encountered that? Yeah. Have you tried writing 6-word stories? The most famous one is this one. I'm going to type it in the chat. There. The 2-sentence horror stories count as flash fiction. That is the most famous 6-word story, right? And diba, it tells a story. It's a complete story. Um, and it even has that nice little ironic twist at the end. Yeah, so it's a good writing prompt. Okay, yes, Hemingway. Hemingway wrote that. So back to our story, what is to come. I was reading your Padlets, and well, a lot of you guys, that got it right. Some things lang to consider, right? As another approach, another um, or other things to think about when you're talking about the story. A lot of you talked about how the line "we have run around like headless chickens," we have sung and we have danced as a way of talking about the happy um, life of the family. But consider that's also the life of what happens when you are campaigning, right? A campaign run is like that you are running around, um, all to various venues, and you do, if you've seen campaigns, no, they do song and dance numbers to kind of capture the attention of the audience. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was also what the mother, the narrator was saying when she talked about we have sung and we have danced, right? And they sung and they danced obviously because they wanted to win, and the husband did win. What clue gave you the idea that uh, the diamond ring was not for the wife? And some people were like, "Oh, it wasn't for the wife." No, it wasn't for the wife.
Sir, siguro po kasi the poet used the third person.
Yeah, the term used was his woman, right? And it's an interesting term to use because um, 'di ba, when pag hindi mo gusto yung tao, you usually say that woman, right? Or that man. Diba? So there is a, it's not even a he or a she. You're reducing the person to a noun. So there is that sense of that there is an implied uh, dislike, let's put it that way, towards the person. and yet and then the person is given a diamond ring, and therefore, right, um a lot of you got it that when the son asks for a diet drink, she gives the son water, and then that's already a statement of, I don't want it to be like that. Right? I'm not raising my son um, to be like the father, because the father is yun nga, um, is uh, sleeping around, right? Having an affair, and she knows. Now, a lot of you guys actually touched on the the speculated on why she would stay, because she knows that he's having an affair, right? And yet, even if he's having the husband is having an affair, um, she campaigns for the husband. We have sung, we have danced, we have run around like headless chickens. She campaigns for the husband, and yet knowing that the husband is having an affair and is giving the wife the girlfriend a diamond ring. So some of you guys speculated that that could be because the husband is successful, but wouldn't it also be possible that it's also because the wife has her own ambitions, right? That she has her own ambitions, and it's um, she's campaigning for the husband because it also supports whatever ambitions she has. Now the thing is, we don't know this. This is speculative. Why? Because I can't tell you where in the text it is, and that's already, you know, where we extrapolate from the text. But if you ask me to defend it in the text, I really can't say. There's nothing in it that tells you that, right? At best, it's an implication, right? So, so there. But I thought you guys did very well in your Padlets, right? I'm wondering lang, why are some people anonymous in the Padlet? Is that because of the app itself, that it doesn't allow you to put your name? I know some of you are anonymous and then you put your name underneath, right? But I'm just wondering why it doesn't identify you when you post. The other thing I was happy with is that you guys read Terry Eagleton, and apparently you guys read all of him. I'm surprised. That's a reason. It's a pretty long reading, I think, for an initial reading. But I thought it's actually an entire book. It's an entire book, which is entitled "How to Read Literature." So we could just do the whole book, the whole set, if you if I felt like it. But we don't have to, right? I think that was the first chapter was already enough for Eagleton to kind of share with us, um, not just the how of it. He didn't just talk about how of it, but like as many of you pointed out, he demonstrated it in the reading. Right? He was doing close readings over and over again in various ways. He did fiction, he did poetry, he did drama. Um, and I thought that was admirable of him. So it's a very compact way of this is how you close read, right? And I like him. Terry Eagleton, I think, is one of those guys who is still alive, is still very much alive and very active as a critic. He's one of those guys who, if you wanted to learn a lot about literary criticism, he's a very good guy to follow. Okay. Um, the other thing is, when with the discussion that I had, and I used a sonnet, right, which might be familiar to you guys. It's a pretty common sonnet, right? Sonnet 18 of William Shakespeare, right? But if you do a close reading of Sonnet 18, I'm going to share it just so you can see. If you do a close reading of Sonnet 18, did you notice something about it? Um, this one, right? Right. Um, what's his opinion of his loved one? What's the persona's opinion of the person that he is writing to? Oh wait, I'm going to stop sharing first. What do you think? He walked his talk. What does it mean? Ah, kay Eagle thought, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. But okay, so if you notice, it's a very common, this is again a very common sonnet. But um, let's share it again so I can talk to you about sonnets a little bit before we move on. Did you guys talk about sonnets before in class? No, no one. Okay, so quick. Uh, wait, let me expand you guys so I can see you there. Quick poetry lesson, right? A sonnet is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines, right? And a sonnet is designed to talk about a problem and then answer it, right? So how does the poet do that? So in the first um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines, the sonnet presents a quote unquote problem. And the problem is this: I'm comparing my loved one to a summer's day, right? And it's like, shall I compare you? But there's a problem. What is it? Summer is actually problematic because summer is not consistent, right? It's too hot, or it could be windy, or it gets cloudy, or as he says, at every fair from fair sometime decline by chance or nature's changing course and trip. So in other words, every beauty from beauty declines by time. Things get old, right? And so what does he say? Well, I can compare you, but there is a difference between my comparison to summer and you. And what is it? You're not going to fade. You're not going to get ugly, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor lose possession of the beauty that you have, nor shall death brag, though wondrous in his shade. So breath cannot brag. Why? Because I wrote a poem about you, right? So my comparison to summer is not complete. And it's actually bet you are better than summer because unlike summer, this poem will not fade. And therefore, your beauty will not fade as well. And di ba, I mean, if you were, and I gave that as an example that you can say you're hot to someone. Wow, you're hot. But if you do that, di ba, how many of the people you like, you go, oh, I'm kind of not, and yeah, I can go out to that person, right? So that's the point of poetry, and that's why that kind of language is important. That's why we do things like that because in truth they are oh, somebody's still arriving. There's Bea. So in truth, that's why we do it because there is a way that it delivers meaning that direct speech, and a lot of people complain of why can't poems be direct. That's the point, right? A poem cannot be direct because a poem will, if it were direct, you won't have that same effect, right? The if you, again love poems, and I can share some more love poems later on from my favorite um, poet, uh, Pablo Neruda, right? And he's a guy who knows how to make someone swoon with his words. We'll do that some other time. So anyway, I gave you guys a quick reviewer of um, elements of fiction and poetry. Actually, just fiction and poetry, because I realized as I was writing this, ang haba na nito. but hindi pa ako tapos, ang haba-haba. And because I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. So, do you guys have? I'm gonna shut up now. I've been talking for like half an hour, I think. Do you guys have any questions or things that you wanted to clarify, or just something to comment? And now I will shut up. Sorry, I couldn't find my mic button. Mikhail, Nick, how about your nickname?
Mikey po.
Oh, Mikey, what? What is it?
Sir, I don't know if it's really, but I was just curious po. The one that the part of the module on my papa's watch. I saw your comment po yesterday. You said that we were all wrong.
You're all
I'm
wrong.
just curious po, like what was your opinion po of the text po?
You're all wrong. You know why? And here's the thing, right? I wanted to save this for another class, but again, let's talk about my papa's waltz. Let me move to that section so that we can talk about it. Oh, I misspelled his name. It's not Theodore, it's Theodore. Oops, sorry. Wait, let me fix his name. Yeah, Theodore. Okay, so Theodore Rusty wrote this, and let me share it again so you guys, we're all looking at the same thing, right? So this is the poem, right? And everybody, and you're not the only ones who are wrong. Everybody who I've shown this poem to will say that the child is being abused, right? I don't think so, right? Let me tell you why. Yes, the dad was drunk. We're definitely sure about that, right? The first line pa lang, the whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy, but I hung on like death. Such waltzing wasn't easy. So what are they doing?
Di ba parang, ay, sorry.
Go.
Wala ako nakaka-type sa discussion dun. Pero hindi ko po kasi, ayaw ko muna basahin din yung replies ng iba kasi baka makompromise yung pagkakaintindi ko. But based po dun sa pagkakaintindi, hindi ba parang wholesome, lang siya, father-child bonding. Tapos parang, well, sa una kasi yun yung parang ma-impression sa una ka, like kapag wala kang context sa following stanzas. Pero, na-emphasize nung, wait, the hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle. At every step you missed, my right ear scraped on knuckle. You beat time on my head with the palm kicked hard by dirt. Then waltzed me off the bed, slipping into the shit.
So what's up? Unang tanong, anong ginagawa nila?
Parang naglalambingan po. Like, kasi parang di ba yung child
Nakakap.
bit
Nakakap.
water, naka-uwi lang, tas lasing. Ganun.
Yeah, what are they doing? Yes, Fia.
Sir, di ako sure. Pero, sexual harassment po ba?
No. Not at all. Bea,
Sir, I'm not sure rin po, but are they literally dancing?
they're dancing. My papa's waltz. They're dancing. And they're dancing where? In the house. Right? They're dancing in the house. The dad is drunk. And what happens? They hit the pans in the kitchen shelf while dancing. Right? So, nahulog yung pans. Here's some things that tell me that it's probably not abuse. Why? Number one, why is the kid clinging to the parent kung binubugbog siya? Number one, that's weird. Wouldn't you be running away? Number two, the line, my mother's countenance could not unfrown itself. Is the mother frowning or smiling? Right? Number one. Number two, the mother is there while the dad and the son, I think it's the son are dancing. if it was a case of domestic violence, would the mother stand by and watch her son get beaten up? Points lang. Number three, everybody cites this the third stanza. The hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle. Every step you missed, at every step you missed, my right ear scraped the buckle. Okay, so first off, hand is battered, right? Bugbog yung knuckle, right? And it seemed to imply violence, right? A battered knuckle. And yet you had in the next line, a palm caked hard by dirt. So is the battered knuckle because he beats people up, or is the battered knuckle because of the work that he does? Right? What could be the work of the dad? We're not really sure, right? But it's manual labor, dirty hands, right? So what about the idea of the right ear scraping a buckle? Okay, the dad and again, imagine the dad and the son and they're dancing, right? They're waltzing. If the son was small, where would the son's head be? Right? Could be like at the belt buckle, right? And so as they're dancing, and if the dad is drunk, so he stumbles, the right ear will scrape the belt buckle, right? So, and the last thing I have is this: the last two lines. So then waltz me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt. So they're dancing and they're dancing, and he dances, and I said he waltzes his child to bed, and the child is still clinging. Is that the behavior of someone who is beat up? Right? To me, it's the behavior of someone whose dad is drunk and he decided to romp around the house, knocked over the kitchen pots, which made the mommy smart, which made the mommy frown. But that's it. That's all she did. Right? She frowned. And it's a strange thing. My mother's countenance could not unfrown itself. So there is a sense of she's frowning, but she also doesn't want to. She wants to unfrown, but she can't because she doesn't approve of the kitchen pots falling. Right? So and that's why I say it's wrong because it's actually not a story of abuse, despite the fact that there are images that point to it. It's actually a reminiscence of a moment in the time of a young boy's life when him and his dad, or her and her dad, if it's a girl, um, danced, right? Danced to bed. The thing there is nga, why did we have those assumptions of abuse or sexual harassment? It's because of our context, right? It's already our own experiences filtering the work. Rothke wrote this, if I remember right, the 1950s or 1960s, very different time, right? Very different time. Drinking was not unusual. Your dad coming home drunk was not unusual. And therefore, the idea of that moment being just that was very common. Now, kasi you hear those words, and there have been so many stories of domestic abuse and drunken parents and children getting beat up that we've experienced, we've seen, we've read. That's where our minds go, right? But that's why that was my point here. It's not a domestic abuse story. It's just someone remembering, you know, this moment with their parent. Right? If you look at the overall tone kasi of the poem, it's not dark, right? It's not a dark poem at all. It's actually kind of lullaby-ish, right? So there's that disconnect between ay binubugbog siya, ba't siya nakakapit? Ay binubugbog siya, ba't walang ginagawa yung nanay? Ay binubugbog siya, ba't siya nakakapit pa rin at bit siya papuntang kama, right? There are all these things that to me tell me it's not abuse. But why do we see that? And again, I don't blame you. You're not really I'm not saying that there's some sort of incapacity that you guys have. It's really experience. It's really our experiences that have led us to read like that. And that's something that I share because that's something you have to be aware of also when you're reading a work. Historical periods affect meaning. So, and I think one of the best examples of this, right, is the Bible. If you read a lot of people will. So, okay, wait, so Vince is saying, if we're to answer the interpretation of the poem, would you get a low grade? No, right? I will grade you based on how you argue. I will not grade you on uh, I will not grade you on exact correctness and wrongness, especially if it's an interpretation, right? Again, how you argue, because an interpretation is based on how you see the work, number one. Number two, how you defend the work, your interpretation. One of the worst, and we're also used to reading poems beyond the words the author uses. That's why we had a tendency to interpret it through metaphors. Yes, the thing is, that's something about poetry, no? Which I think we'll talk about in the next chapter anyway, or in the coming weeks. The first layer of poetry is the literal one. Don't forget that. People kasi tend to jump to what's the figurative meaning? What's the symbolic meaning? What's the deeper idea? Sige, how about this one? I'll show you another poem. There, I'll share you this poem. There. So this one, you see it? Okay. Munching a plum on the street, a paper bag of them in her hand, they taste good to her. They taste good to her. They taste good to her. You can see it by the way she gives herself, the one half sucked out in her hand. Comforted, a solace of ripe plums seeming to fill the air, they taste good to her. What's happening? What's going on in the poem? Anyone?
The lady's eating plums.
That's it, right? The lady is eating a plum. Is there some sort of deeper meaning? Well, yes, but the first layer we have to get over is the fact that she's eating a plum, right? Why is that important? Because that layer leads you to the next. What's the next layer? How good is the plum?
Very good, sir. Very good.
How do you know it's very good?
The way she keeps repeating, they taste good to her, they taste good to her, blah, 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 blah.
Right? There is a repetition. And the repetition is interesting because William Carlos Williams takes the same line, they taste good to her, and he cuts it different ways. The first one is, they taste good to her. The second one is, they taste good to her. The third one is, they taste. And then the last one is, good to her. Right? So in that sense, William Carlos Williams is giving you layers of emphasis. One, they taste good to her. How good? They taste good. Right? What's important? They taste. Who is it good for? To her. Right? That series of representations gives you, like, it emphasizes how good it is several times over. And it doesn't just emphasize it. It gives you what is it being emphasized, how is it being emphasized, and who is it being emphasized for. Right? And so, we know that she's eating a plum and that they taste good to her. Why is that important? Right now, all we have is a picture. Someone eating a plum, right? And he adds to it by saying he talks about how she gives herself the one half sucked out in her hand. I don't know if you understand the term how she gives herself to it. What does that mean? you can actually translate it into Filipino. Paano niya binigay yung sarili niya sa hawak-hawak niyang plum? What does that mean when you give yourself, in this case, to a fruit? Hala, magta-type mo.
Sir, parang ninanamnam niya talaga.
Yes, right? Binigay, in other words, you're not just eating the fruit, you're not just enjoying the fruit, you're literally trying to, in a sense, become the fruit. Alam mo yun? I don't know if you've ever eaten anything like that where you're trying to literally get your face into the food because you like it so much that you want to become the food. So, right? And so the last line says, comforted, a solace of bright plums seeming to fill the air. Why is she doing that? Because it is a source of comfort. It's not just because they taste good to her, right? And this is where the image becomes a metaphor. The plum, the delicious plums, are actually what? Comfort. Right? So in which case, right? And that's an example of what I was talking about. Sometimes you have to go through the literal first. Or not yet, sometimes you have to go through the literal first before you get to the figurative. Because if you don't, you're gonna jump and you're gonna run into all these problems about interpretation. Because you have to deal with your own internal filters bothering your interpretation. For example, some people are going through a bad time with their parents, and suddenly everything is about their parents. Or you've just broken up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and suddenly everything you see is about your boyfriend and your girlfriend. That happens, right? And so imagine if you're interpreting a poem and you're in that state of mind and you're not really paying attention, wala. It reminds you of my boyfriend kasi, right? I'll tell you another story, but for another time because, well, we have 2 minutes to go before the bell ends. So, anyway, we'll stop here, right? I'm going to stop recording.